Hello, this is MovieMash Recapped. I will now be explaining a horror movie called Let Her Out. Warning: this contains spoilers. Be cautious and mindful. An early scene in the movie features a young woman residing at the Gemini Motel. She works as a prostitute. One hectic night, she hears a shadowy figure approaching her chamber. The intruder attacks and rapes her. When she later finds out she is pregnant, she kills herself with a pair of scissors in an attempt to end her pregnancy, but the unborn kid lives. The movie opens 23 years after the occurrence and features Helen, who withstood her terrified mother's prenatal attack. She currently lives in Toronto with Molly, her best friend, and works as a bike courier. One day, Helen is given the duty of delivering items to her buddy Roman's home. Since it is Helen's birthday on that day, Roman presents her with a painting that he claims to be Helen's darker side. Helen brings the painting home right away. Helen tells Molly the tale of her mother's passing while they are staying at her motel. Molly is really concerned about Helen's health. Since Helen doesn't have any other family, Molly is constantly there to help. Molly quickly departs the area because she needs to meet with Ed, her lover. Helen sustains severe injuries after being hit by a car on her way back from the motel. Next, Helen is brought to the hospital. She sustains many fractures as well as a head injury. Helen is finally permitted to return home a few weeks later. To celebrate Helen's arrival, Molly and her friends plan a small party. Helen meets Ed, Molly's boyfriend, during the party, and he looks interested in her. As the celebration is going on, Helen abruptly starts to lose consciousness and have a blackout. She wakes up in an empty parking lot. It's an empty parking lot. Helen finds the previous events confusing. She phones Molly right away to find out what transpired while she was unconscious. Molly explains that Helen departed the celebration without informing her of where she was going. Unaware of what transpired, Helen anxiously makes her way back home. Helen begins to paint strange pictures at home, but ultimately she places Roman's work below and covers it with a cloth out of fear. Helen begins her day as normal the following day, which includes eating, exercising, and taking a shower. Just as she finishes taking a shower, suddenly she begins to notice a strange figure. She then goes through another blackout and awakens with an injured foot in front of her friends. Molly and others are confused. There, Molly explains to Helen that she went out with just a towel. Helen had vanished for a few hours. Helen's foot is already bleeding when she gets home. Helen begins to remove the broken glass from her feet. The following day, Helen and Molly visit Dr. Headley, a doctor, to consult about what is happening to Helen. Dr. Headley started asking some questions. Helen explains that she is always moving from place to place unconsciously. She was in one place and suddenly woke up in another. It has happened multiple times since the accident. Furthermore, she frequently sees a black shadow. After hearing her explanation, the doctor chooses to undergo a CT scan on her brain, with results expected the next day. Helen gets home right away and heads straight to bed. In her sleep, she sees fleeting visions of a female figure. Helen wakes up to a call from Dr. Headley. The doctor tells Helen that something strange has happened to Helen's brain. Hearing this, Helen heads to the hospital. There, the doctor explains that they discover a rare type of tumor in her brain. It turns out that for all this time, someone else has been living in her brain. It turns out that Helen's mother was pregnant twins when she stabbed herself earlier in an attempt to abort her pregnancy. One of the fetuses was indeed killed in utero, but was subsequently absorbed into the skull of the survivor Helen. Previous vehicle accident activated this long-dormant twin, which is developing rapidly now and is responsible for Helen's loss of memory and unpredictable in her behavior. She now suffers from a condition known as vanishing twin syndrome, an actual disorder that occurs when a twin disappears in the uterus during pregnancy as a result of a miscarriage of a twin. The surviving fetus then absorbs the twin into its body. This results in Helen having two different personas, Helen and her twin sister. Then, in order to remove her twin from her brain, the doctor orders that she have surgery. However, she needs to wait 3 days until the surgery. Later at home, she sees the creepy painting that Roman gave. Suddenly, the painting appeared on the wall. She thinks that Molly was the one putting it back, but it wasn't. At last, she makes the choice to give Roman back the artwork. Arriving at Roman's house, Helen sees no sign of Roman. All that's visible to her is a video on a laptop that shows Helen brutally torturing Roman. Roman may be seen pleading for mercy in the video. However, unconsciously, Helen killed Roman. Helen cannot remember any of those. She notices broken glass after exploring Roman's home, and she remembered the day she returned home with an injured foot. Helen is now convinced that inside her, there are two personas. Helen is in control of her body, but sometimes her twin is in control. Helen now realizes she is at war with her own body and mind. She hastily returns home and ties her hands and feet to prevent herself from leaving the house. The following day, Helen starts out for nighttime walks since she's bored at home. But she starts having hallucinations and decides to use the toilets nearby. She begins to take off her arm cast and opens her hand's surgical scars. The sight of another human finger in her hand shocks her. Then, she decides to leave that place. Ed, Molly's boyfriend, starts pursuing Helen from behind. Ed is very interested in the beauty of Helen. Therefore, he intends to rape her. Helen's twin starts to take over the body at that point. Then she scares him by pointing a knife at him. She regains consciousness and runs home right away. At home, Molly then tells Helen to stop painting weird and frightening pictures. Helen, however, admits that she did not sketch the images. They argue until Helen's twin eventually takes over her body and begins attacking Molly.
Helen, stop!
When she regains control, she realizes she could have hurt Molly. Helen eventually tells Molly to keep away from her. However, Molly refuses, so Helen makes the decision to leave that place and avoid Molly. On the way, Helen meets Ed. Ed is seeking revenge because Helen previously pointed him with a knife. Helen starts to clarify that she wasn't the one performing all of that, and that she was just sick. Ed doesn't listen to Helen, who intends to rape her. At the same time, her identical twin begins to assume possession of Helen's body, instantly killing Ed. Helen kills Ed, returns to consciousness, and discovers that Ed has passed away. Helen intends to end her life at the Gemini Motel, the same place her mother ended her own life years ago, after realizing how dangerous she has become. Elsewhere, Molly starts to go through her old pictures with Helen. She notices a noticeable change between her before and after photos. She notices a shift in her personality as well. At last, she comes to the conclusion that Helen possesses two different people her body, and the one who attacked her was not Helen. Molly gives Helen a call right away to ask where she is. Helen says goodbye, as she discloses that she would be ending her life at the Gemini Motel. When Molly hears this, she gets on her bike and heads directly to the motel. Helen's twin starts taking over her body as she is preparing to kill herself, having just checked into the motel. Then Molly shows up at the motel. But it's too late now. Helen's body is entirely under the control of her twin. She attacks Molly right away. Despite Molly's best efforts to defend herself, she is eventually forced to kill Helen. In the last scene, Molly walks home, remembering all her memories with Helen. And thus the film comes to a close. To support the channel, please like, turn on notifications, and subscribe for more videos. Thanks for watching.